In June 12, 2015, the Maldives. The name alone conjures images of sparkling blue waters, white sand beaches, and luxury resorts. It's the kind of place most people only dream of visiting, let alone spending their honeymoon. For John, a 70-year-old man, and his new bride Samantha, a vibrant 28-year-old woman, this was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, a fresh start, a celebration of their love. But as the sun set on their first day in paradise, their fairy tale would soon come to a shattering end. Just days after arriving in the Maldives, the beautiful resort they'd chosen for their honeymoon would become the scene of something unfathomable. Samantha's life would be stolen from her in a brutal attack, leaving everyone asking, who could do something so horrific to someone they once loved? What happened in that luxurious ocean view suite? How did a seemingly perfect couple end up in such a terrifying nightmare? Was this a crime of passion, or was there something deeper, more chilling, behind the violence that unfolded that night? Stay with us as we unpack the twisted details of this chilling crime, piece by piece, to uncover what went wrong on this dream vacation turned deadly. If you enjoy content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like, and share this video with your friends. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. John, at 70 years old, had lived a life filled with experiences, some joyful, some filled with hardship. He had seen the highs of success and the lows of loss. His days of youthful vigor had long passed, but one thing remained: his desire for companionship. Despite his age, John felt the need for connection, something his heart still craved. And when he met Samantha, the 28-year-old woman who would become his bride, something changed. She brought a renewed energy into his life, a sense of vitality he hadn't felt in years. For Samantha, life seemed full of endless possibilities. She was just beginning to feel the weight of her adult life, excited for new adventures and eager to experience everything the world had to offer. Her friends often described her as ambitious, full of life, and always looking ahead, planning her future. She had dreams of travel, new experiences, and finding a partner to share those dreams with. When she met John, it seemed like she had found exactly what she was looking for: a man who could offer her stability, a sense of security, and the adventure she craved. Their courtship seemed like a storybook romance. John, with his wealth and experience, offered Samantha a comfortable life. Samantha, with her youth and enthusiasm, brought a fresh perspective to John's world. They were an unlikely couple, but it seemed to work. They quickly fell in love, and before long they were engaged. At first glance, their relationship appeared to be the perfect pairing. But beneath the surface, things weren't as ideal as they seemed. While their connection seemed to spark joy for both of them, their age difference raised eyebrows. Samantha's friends and family didn't necessarily approve of the rapid progression of their relationship. They wondered how a man who had lived decades more than her could offer her what she truly needed. John, on the other hand, seemed blissfully unaware of the concerns others had about his relationship. But there were whispers. Was this really love, or was something more complicated going on behind closed doors? Despite their whirlwind romance, there were early signs that their relationship wasn't as perfect as it appeared. Samantha's ambitions and desire for independence began to clash with John's need for control. As the days passed, a subtle pattern began to emerge. John wasn't simply an older man in love with a younger woman. He had certain expectations of Samantha, ones that seemed to grow more demanding as their relationship deepened. Some of Samantha's friends began to notice odd behavior from John, comments that felt possessive, overbearing. John wasn't shy about voicing his opinions, and it seemed like he was trying to control more aspects of their life together. Financial matters, too, became a source of tension. While Samantha was excited to start a new chapter with her partner, she began to feel the weight of his expectations. Did his wealth come with strings attached? Samantha's friends spoke of moments when John seemed to dominate conversations, when he dismissed her opinions and made decisions without consulting her. And yet Samantha, ever the optimist, brushed it off as just part of their dynamic. After all, they were in love, right? But was it love, or was there something else? Was this age gap hiding a darker, more controlling side to John? Some of Samantha's close friends even whispered that perhaps John's affection was more possessive than genuine love. Did he want her as a partner or as a trophy? Was Samantha's youth a source of his pride, a validation of his own life. As their relationship moved quickly, with Samantha seemingly adapting to John's world of wealth and privilege, there were moments where things didn't feel right. Samantha began to spend less time with her old friends, finding herself more isolated. John's influence over her life started to feel more intrusive. Was he trying to shape her into the woman he wanted her to be? Or was this simply the way he showed love? Despite all this, Samantha continued to look ahead, always the hopeful one, focusing on her future with John. But was her optimism enough to ignore the growing tension, the nagging doubts she had about their relationship? The honeymoon, supposed to be a joyous occasion, would be the ultimate test of what had been building quietly behind the scenes. Did this age gap mask a darker, more controlling relationship dynamic? Was John's version of love overshadowed by his need for power and control? Or did Samantha, caught in the whirlwind of her dreams, fail to see the warning signs? These are the questions that linger as we begin to unravel the truth behind this honeymoon turned deadly. The Maldives, the world's most serene paradise, with breathtaking views and an atmosphere so peaceful it could make anyone forget their troubles. But for John and Samantha, the honeymoon that was supposed to symbolize their new life together would soon become a nightmare they could never have imagined. Arriving at the resort, they were immediately struck by the beauty surrounding them. The crystal-clear waters stretched out as far as the eye could see, and the luxurious private villa was perched right on the edge of the beach, offering sweeping views of the turquoise ocean. The couple had everything at their fingertips: world-class service, delicious food, and access to every luxury the island had to offer. It seemed like the perfect setting to celebrate their love, but paradise is often only skin deep. At first, everything appeared perfect. John and Samantha were seen by staff strolling along the beach, hand in hand, laughing over dinner, and enjoying the tranquility of their surroundings. Their days were filled with long walks, romantic meals, and moments of connection. But behind closed doors, the atmosphere was far from the perfect vacation they had envisioned. The honeymoon began in the usual fashion. Walks along the beach, dipping their toes in the warm water, the gentle sounds of the waves crashing on the shore. For a brief moment, it felt like everything was as it should be. John, though older, seemed to enjoy the luxury around him. Samantha, eager to embrace every part of the experience, soaked in the beauty of the Maldives. However, some of the resort staff began to notice subtle signs of tension between the couple. While John and Samantha were often seen together, their interactions seemed strained at times. Samantha appeared to be more reserved, almost as though she were walking on eggshells. She would smile, but it didn't always reach her eyes. John, on the other hand, was in his element, overseeing the activities and ensuring everything was to his liking. Was he trying to maintain a perfect image of their honeymoon, or was he subtly asserting control? On the second day, things took a more distinct turn. Their activities seemed to shift from leisurely exploration to something more calculated. While John seemed content with the daily schedule, Samantha expressed interest in exploring the island on her own. Perhaps a small desire for independence, a desire to take a breath away from her new husband. She went snorkeling, enjoyed a private spa, and tried to enjoy the beauty of the island in her own way. But there was a noticeable tension when they reunited at dinner. John, perhaps sensing her need for space, seemed irritated. Was this just a passing moment of frustration, or did it signal something deeper brewing? By day 3, things began to take a strange turn. Samantha, while still attempting to enjoy her time, was now visibly more withdrawn. It wasn't the same carefree joy she had shown on the first day. Conversations between the couple seemed forced, their interactions more strained. They argued over something trivial, perhaps a disagreement about their plans, or maybe it was something unspoken, a growing rift between them that was becoming too difficult to ignore. John's temper seemed to flare more quickly than before. He became increasingly impatient with Samantha, though no one outside their private space could know for sure what was happening behind the villa doors. For the first time, staff members reported hearing raised voices coming from their villa, a stark contrast to the otherwise peaceful setting of the resort. A few onlookers saw Samantha's face as she passed by on her way to a spa session. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look of concern. Something was off, but what? By now, Samantha's friends were beginning to grow concerned. Had the initial excitement of the trip worn off, Or was something much more disturbing unfolding in the shadows? Was there more to John's behavior than met the eye? And was his increasing frustration with Samantha merely a sign of a man getting older and more irritable? Or was it the emergence of something darker? Possessiveness, control, even manipulation. At this point, something was about to snap. Was it John's growing temper? Or was it the weight of the seemingly perfect marriage that was beginning to buckle under the strain of unspoken expectations, financial pressures, and a growing sense of dissatisfaction? What was supposed to be a dream vacation was now becoming a pressure cooker. With each passing hour, the distance between John and Samantha widened, the tension built, and it was only a matter of time before something explosive would occur. The moments leading up to the crime were becoming clearer. It wasn't just a case of mismatched expectations. It was a toxic environment that was being concealed by smiles and beautiful sunsets. Was the age gap playing a role in the growing rift? Or was something more insidious taking place? Only time would reveal how much darkness lay beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic marriage. As the tension reached its breaking point, the atmosphere was charged. Something was bound to happen. Would John's temper finally take over? Or would it be something even more disturbing that would change everything? As the clock ticked down to the night of the crime, the Maldives, once a paradise, became the setting for something far more tragic. The honeymoon had become a battleground, and no one could predict the outcome. The evening of June 15, 2015, started like any other at the resort. But as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and orange, the tranquility of the Maldives was shattered by something far darker than anyone could have anticipated. The couple's villa, once a symbol of romantic bliss, became the scene of a crime so horrifying that no one could quite believe it. As the night settled in, something inside the villa snapped. It wasn't just a matter of a heated argument or frustration. It was far more chilling than that. Details of what transpired inside the villa are scarce, but the final moments of Samantha's life were undoubtedly violent. Staff members who later tried to check on the couple described an unsettling quiet, followed by the sound of muffled voices. But by the time anyone could react, it was too late. At some point during the night, John turned on his new wife with a rage that seemed unimaginable for the man who had once pledged to love and protect her. Samantha, trapped in the isolation of their private villa, likely tried to fight back, but her efforts were futile. John's attack was brutal and swift, leaving no chance for escape. It wasn't a moment of spur-of-the-moment violence. It was calculated, methodical, almost like he knew exactly how far he could go. The severity of her injuries suggested a deliberate cruelty. Samantha's body was discovered later that evening, bloodied and unrecognizable from the brutal beating. Her once vibrant face was now a picture of devastation. It was clear that she had suffered severe trauma, blunt force injuries that left her barely recognizable. As if John had attacked her with cold precision, her injuries were not random or hasty. They seemed purposeful, as though she had been targeted specifically, without mercy or remorse. Her body was discovered in the bedroom, sprawled across the floor. It was a disturbing scene. Blood was everywhere, staining the floor, the bed, even splattered on the walls, suggesting a violent struggle that had unfolded in the confined space. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a momentary loss of control. This was deliberate, and it was chilling. But what was even more unsettling was the absence of any signs of forced entry. The doors and windows were locked. Everything was as it should be. This wasn't a random break-in. No strangers had entered the villa. The only person inside, the only person with the power to carry out such a gruesome act, was John. When staff members arrived at the scene, John's reaction was perplexing. Unlike what you might expect from someone who had just brutally murdered their wife, he appeared oddly calm, almost indifferent to the chaos around him. He didn't seem shaken by the horrific scene. There was no visible remorse, no signs of guilt. Instead, John acted as though it were all just a bad dream, a strange, unsettling dream that he couldn't fully comprehend. John was found sitting on the edge of the bed, his face expressionless, his demeanor almost unnervingly collected. He didn't appear to be in a state of shock, as you might expect from someone who had just taken a life. There were no frantic attempts to explain himself, No desperate cries for help, no remorse in his eyes. His behavior suggested that the act of violence wasn't one born of impulsive rage. It seemed cold, calculated, as though he had planned this moment, or at the very least, was prepared for it. When the police arrived, they were immediately suspicious of his demeanor. John's indifference stood out as a key point of focus. Was he too calm? Was he pretending to be in shock? Or was he hiding something far darker beneath the surface? His reaction raised alarms, and investigators began to piece together the evidence of a more complex and sinister situation. Upon further investigation, the details of the crime scene became even more disturbing. Forensics revealed that there had been no signs of forced entry into the villa, which meant only one thing. Samantha's killer had been someone she trusted, a spouse, a partner, someone close enough to her to gain easy access to the villa without arousing suspicion. There were no signs of a break-in, no struggle at the door, no broken locks or shattered windows. Everything pointed to John being the one responsible. If this wasn't a crime of passion, if this wasn't a random act of violence by an outsider, then what was it? The evidence suggested something chilling. A trusted relationship had been shattered. John, the man who was supposed to protect his wife, had betrayed that trust in the most horrific way possible. He had transformed their honeymoon into a scene of unspeakable violence, and he had done it without any of the typical signs of emotional distress. He had not only killed Samantha, he had done so with a chilling sense of detachment, as if he were carrying out some dark, inevitable task. The crime scene spoke volumes, and it painted a picture of a man who had controlled every aspect of their relationship, perhaps too tightly until finally something broke. It was no longer a honeymoon. It was a tragic conclusion to a union built on lies, manipulation, and perhaps an overwhelming need for dominance. As investigators continued to piece together the facts, one thing was clear. Samantha's death was not the result of a sudden outburst of anger. It was the product of something far darker, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for much longer than anyone could have imagined. The response from the Maldivian police was swift. Once the horrifying discovery of Samantha's body was made, law enforcement was immediately called to the scene. The serene paradise of the Maldives, known for its tourism and idyllic atmosphere, was now thrust into the spotlight for something far more sinister. Initially, the situation appeared to be a tragic accident. The luxury resort staff and local authorities assumed that perhaps the couple had experienced a domestic dispute that escalated. But it could have been a case of Samantha falling, hitting her head, or even some sort of freak accident. The scene, though violent, didn't immediately scream murder. The lack of forced entry into the villa, combined with John's calm demeanor, led investigators to approach the situation with caution. But as detectives began sifting through the evidence, their instincts began to shift. The more they dug, the more the story didn't add up. The injuries on Samantha's body, severe blunt force trauma, were inconsistent with a simple accident or a momentary outburst. The pattern of violence and the extent of the damage left no room for doubt. As the investigation unfolded, small discrepancies in John's account began to surface. He initially claimed to have found Samantha in the villa after a brief absence, but the timeline didn't make sense. John had been alone with her in the villa for hours, yet he failed to mention any unusual sounds, any signs of a struggle, or anything that might have tipped him off to what was happening behind those walls. His calmness didn't match the scene of devastation that was discovered just hours later. The authorities soon started to question John's account of events. His story didn't match the evidence found in the room. Why did he seem so unbothered by the brutality of his wife's death? Why wasn't there any panic in his voice when he was found by staff, or any frantic efforts to explain what had happened? These contradictions were hard to ignore. As John was interrogated, the tension inside the room was palpable. His responses were almost mechanical, a stark contrast to the grisly details of Samantha's murder. The detective said, "John, we need to know what happened that night. Can you tell us exactly what you did when you found your wife?" John answered, "I found her. I walked in, and she was just lying there. I didn't know what to do. I called for help." The detective asked, "But John, when you found her, there was no sign of a struggle at the door, no forced entry. So why would she just lie there, unresisting? if someone had come in to attack her. John answered, I don't know what happened. The more John spoke, the more his story began to unravel. His account of the night was riddled with inconsistencies. He gave conflicting details about his movements, and his timeline didn't align with the evidence. His lack of emotion was striking. He didn't appear broken by the loss of his wife. Instead, he seemed almost inconvenienced by the situation. The detectives couldn't help but notice how he sidestepped questions, evaded direct answers, and became defensive when pressed for details. His cold, detached demeanor stood in stark contrast to the horror of the crime scene. One of the detectives later recalled in an interview, the more we listened to John's story, the less it made sense. The details just weren't matching up with the crime scene. We had a man who, by all accounts, should have been devastated by the loss of his wife. Instead, he was cold, distant, almost indifferent. The forensic evidence told its own story. Samantha's injuries weren't the result of a spontaneous outburst. They were calculated, deliberate, and designed to cause maximum damage. The blood spatter on the walls indicated a violent struggle, but there were no defensive wounds on Samantha's body. She hadn't fought back. She had been caught off guard, likely taken by surprise while trusting the person she loved. John was the only one who could have inflicted those injuries. The absence of forced entry into the villa only reinforced this. The crime scene painted a chilling picture. A man who had methodically planned and executed an act of violence against his wife. As detectives dug deeper into John's past, their suspicions grew. A background check revealed troubling incidents, multiple reports of domestic disputes, and accusations of controlling behavior. This wasn't an isolated incident. There were whispers of John's violent tendencies in past relationships, patterns of dominating his partners, isolating them from family and friends. The detectives found a disturbing connection between his earlier relationships and the way he treated Samantha. Had he used the same manipulation, the same tactics of control on her? The age gap between them had been the least of their concerns. It was the power dynamics that raised alarm bells. John had never been the loving husband he appeared to be. Instead, he was a man with a deep need to control every aspect of his wife's life. Her interactions, her independence, her ability to make choices. When the case finally went to trial, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The prosecution laid out their case with chilling precision. They focused on the damning forensic evidence. Samantha's injuries, the blood spatter, the absence of forced entry. They highlighted John's cold demeanor after the murder, his lack of emotional response, and the discrepancies in his testimony. Key witness testimonies painted a clear picture of the toxic nature of John and Samantha's relationship. Friends spoke of her growing unease, her isolation, and the increasing control John had over her life. Forensic experts presented their findings. Samantha's injuries weren't random. They were targeted, deliberate, the result of a planned act of violence. The defense tried to argue that John, at 70 years old, wasn't physically capable of such violence. They hinted at health issues and suggested Samantha's death might have been an accident, but their case was weak, and they struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence against him. After weeks of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. John was guilty of the premeditated murder of his wife, Samantha. The evidence was irrefutable. The timeline, the forensic findings, the witness testimonies, and, most hauntingly, John's cold and detached behavior in the aftermath. The trial and conviction sent shockwaves through the public. Many expressed disbelief that such a thing could happen in paradise. John's age had been a factor some clung to as a reason for his innocence, but in the end, it didn't matter. The fact remained, he had taken Samantha's life in a moment of cold-blooded violence, and he was held accountable for it. For those who had known Samantha, her loss was felt deeply. She had been taken too soon, her life snuffed out by a man who should have been protecting her. Though justice had been served, it couldn't bring her back. As we close this chapter, we're left with a haunting reminder of how quickly paradise can turn into a nightmare. A honeymoon meant to be the beginning of a new life became the tragic end of Samantha's short, vibrant existence. The Maldives, a place known for its beauty and tranquility, became the scene of a crime that shook everyone who learned about it. Think about the chilling details for a moment. The coldness in John's demeanor, his inconsistent story, the unsettling lack of remorse. The injuries Samantha endured weren't accidental. They were the deliberate actions of a man who had been hiding something darker beneath the surface. This wasn't just an outburst of anger. It was a carefully executed act, leaving no room for misunderstanding. John's past, his controlling nature, and the way he manipulated his wife all led up to that one fateful moment. He had a plan, and it was carried out with chilling precision. But was it just a crime of passion, fueled by jealousy or rage? Or was it something far more calculated, a premeditated act designed to get rid of someone he no longer needed? What do you think happened that night? Was this the result of a fleeting moment of rage? Or was this a crime carefully orchestrated from the very beginning? How much of this tragedy can we attribute to John's power over Samantha, and how much was pure malice? I want to hear your theories. What do you think went down in that hotel room? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them and love engaging with you all. If you want more true crime stories like this one, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. Keep them in the loop so they don't miss out on the next chilling case. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we have in store for the next video. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and always question the truth, because sometimes it's darker than you could ever imagine.